Two high-intensity wars that broke out a year apart, the Russian-Ukrainian and Arab-Israeli wars, have clearly shown that modern tanks have proven to be a weak link. They're relatively easy to hit with anti-tank missiles, hand grenade launchers, and even drones. Numerous videos showed German Leopards, British Challengers, Israeli Merkavas, Russian T-72s, T-80s, and T-92s burning. The effectiveness of the anti-tank weapons was so high that the Russians didn't even risk testing their hyped newest tank, the T-14 Armata, in a combat situation. Highly doubtful of its effectiveness in modern combat. So is it a dead end? Are tanks obsolete? Today we'll talk about the most modern American tank, Abrams X. Whether it can become effective in a battle where the air is crowded with kamikaze drones and where you're hit by all sorts of landings and bushes from anti-tank complexes. And in the end, let's try to imagine this tank on the streets of Gaza when Arab militants jump out of the underground tunnels and hit you point blank with rocket-propelled grenades. The American company General Dynamics, within the framework of the exhibition AUSA 2022, held in Washington from October 10th to 12th, 2022, showed a prototype of the new American tank Abrams X. If you look back a bit in history, this company's recent work to update the U.S. main battle tank, all those Abrams SEP V3 and SEP V4, were frankly disappointing. All this was a frank marathon. Sensors, thermal imaging sensors, and onboard electronics were updated, and something was done to the suspension and powertrain. At the root, it's still the old Abrams, a tank from the 80s of the last century. But when you see Abrams X, you can understand that Americans have clearly decided to move to the fourth-generation tank, and the whole platform of M1 tank should be a thing of the past. In short, the Queen is dead, long live the King. Visually, it's still Abrams, only in style, as if the famous Italian car design firm Pininfarina SPA pumped this tank. It turned out to be very fresh and futuristic. And let's remember, good technique always turns out beautiful. The first thing to pay attention to is that this tank is 10 tons lighter than the last modifications, which were smoothly approaching an already obscene 70 tons. It came to the point that the last Abrams, in case of their damage, could not pull out of the battlefield of the regular airy tractors, and they were doomed to be killed by the enemy. It's assumed that the weight of Abrams X varies between 55 and 58 tons, and it's in this lightning and lies all the main chips of the new tank. There are more of them, and they're more radical than you can imagine. Overweighting of tanks has been a global problem with NATO vehicles for the past couple of decades. Abrams, Leopards, Challengers, and even Israeli Merkavas are confidently breaking the 60-ton mark, and some are even creeping up to 70 tons. For a long time, it was not possible to respond to modern means of defeat with anything but armor buildup, and this armor should surround the combat compartment, spacious for 4 people and stuffed with a lot of electronics. Behind the tons of weight comes the problem of load on the suspension. It's hard for it to fulfill its functions in a vehicle that's getting heavier and heavier. The reliability drops, but the dependence on repair bases grows, which makes it more and more dangerous to let the tanks go far away from the workshops, and the increased wear and tear of elements requires the logistics to be loaded with spare parts. Logistics doesn't end with spare parts, there's also fuel. Its Abrams swallows diesel like Niagara Falls spews water. One tank battalion requires an entourage of refueling trucks that not every airfield has ever seen. And all this goodness has to follow the tanks on the march. But thick armor, which leads to these problems as the 2 wars have shown, does not protect. Further, increase the armor and turn the tank into a land battleship. This is a path to nowhere, a way to a dead end. What to do? Let's see what the designers of the Abrams X have proposed. First of all, it's the abandonment of the loader. Instead, it's an automatic loader. How exactly, we don't know yet. It's likely a belt system as in the French Leclerc. It's not certain yet, but it makes sense as the car is very fresh and a lot of things are secret. It's not a given that we'll know how it's doing anytime soon. Unlike the drum systems in the Russians, the tape greatly increases the crew's chances of survival. If the ammunition pack in Russian tanks is destroyed, it literally blows off the turret, condemning the crew to guaranteed death. There's no place for mortal flesh amid near-sunny temperatures and steel tearing to pieces. Secondly, the turret in the new American tank is uninhabited, like on the Armada. and it seems to be the only solution that dramatically increases the crew's chances of survival in any scenario. The turret's the most vulnerable element of the tank today. It rises in a trench and in a natural shelter in general in battle. Everything flies mostly into it. In addition, an uninhabitable turret, due to the fact that it can be made smaller in size because it doesn't need volumes for people, will weigh less and it'll be harder to get into. It's unlikely that we'll see any revolutionary innovations in the suspension of the new tank, but having solved the problem of mass, you can be sure that its reliability will increase. It's no longer such a hemorrhoidal machine as the previous models, the combat capabilities of which can be multiplied by 0 without a repair base nearby and caravans of spare parts. And finally, thirdly, it's the engine of the tank. It's the new Abrams hybrid, of course not such as the Prius or Chevrolet Volt, but almost. The power plant's based on a new diesel engine from Cummins, but supplemented with electric batteries. Thanks to this, the tank has a silent duty capability. That is, the batteries allow you to operate all the means in stationary mode without starting the engine. But most importantly, there's the possibility of silent maneuvering. Abrams X will be able to almost noiselessly get close to the enemy on batteries alone. The power plant allows to regulate the energy consumption, increasing and decreasing it depending on the needs on the march. It's one of consumption, and during intensive maneuvering, another. As a result, the amount of fuel consumed is reduced by 50%, and this is very serious. Tank units can greatly reduce the number of refueling trucks, while the tank itself can operate autonomously for much longer. Finally, the tank is less warm, becoming less visible in thermal imaging, which means it's more difficult to capture by the guidance systems of enemy tanks and anti-tank complexes of the third generation. But the innovations don't end there. What the tank is created for? To destroy the enemy. With what? A cannon. That's what we'll talk about now. It's new, but of the same caliber of 120 millimeters, based on the same Rheinmetall, and is a development of the American system XM1202. The new gun is made of composite materials, which made it almost a ton lighter than the previous M256, and compared to the XM1202, the problems of oscillation and stabilization during firing have been solved. The gun can use the entire range of previous ammunition, but also has its own, more advanced, with programmable detonation, and most importantly, with the correction at distances beyond visual range. As for missile armament, because all modern tanks can launch missiles through the barrel as well, there were debates around it. The diameter of the missile is limited by the caliber, and compared to the warheads for Javelin, TOW, Spike, or Hellfire, such missiles are not able to penetrate the armor of tanks designed later than the mid-'80s. And modern tanks, these missiles, even not in the forehead, but on the less protected side, penetrate far. The Pentagon has shown interest in guided munitions for tanks, capable of attacking the enemy tank in the upper projection, as does, for example, the Javelin. Armor protection of tanks in these places is the thinnest. Even with reinforcement by dynamic inserts, it's not enough to protect against upper attacks. In principle, it's not so difficult to create a tank missile with top attack mode. There are rumors about guided missiles with this capability, but these are still rumors as well as technical solutions for this. On the turret of the new Abrams, we can see 2 panoramic sights with 360-degree view, laser, thermal, and multi-sensor sensors there, but the rest is still a mystery. Such a sight is equally effective in all weather conditions and time of day. The main digital component is the Open Electronic Architecture Catalyst, which turns all tanks of the unit into a network, combining data with the unit's drones. Battlefield awareness depends not only on its own assets, but also on UAV data that disperses the fog of war for tens of kilometers, giving commanders information about the enemy before it can attack. There will be far fewer surprises in a combat situation because the information network is unified. Probably it'll be supplemented by barrage shells, also drones capable of destroying threats before the tanks enter the field of their reach. This is all predictable, but the main highlight was a module with a 30mm XM914 autocannon in the place where there used to be a 12.7mm machine gun. The cannon's tasks are to solve firing tasks that are not prioritized for the main gun. These are manpower and light armored vehicles. The module, in fact, is a turret on a turret. Its firing sector does not depend on the position of the turret and works off targets independent of it. Although there's only 30mm in the nomenclature of ammunition, there are programmable air bursts, the task of which is to fire at drones. How the sky reconnaissance, target acquisition, and target acquisition happened, we don't know yet. Production of pre-production samples of Abrams X, the 1st Battalion, is planned to be formed by 2025, and the first contact for 96 vehicles is worth $1,140 million. From this, we can calculate the cost of one tank at $12 million, which is not much for a full-fledged 4th-generation tank. And now let's fantasize a little and imagine that the Pentagon sent the first pre-production models to Israel to help in the fight against Palestinian militants. How would this tank prove itself? We think that both Israelis and Arabs would feel the difference compared to the Merkava Mk4. First of all, the new Abrams would be much more agile. It's one thing to have a nearly 70-ton Merkava and another to have a 58-ton tank, and in urban combat, mobility plays a big role. Secondly, there would be better awareness due to the use of UAVs. It would be much more difficult to get close to such a tank with a grenade launcher, and a line from a 30 gun is not the same as a line from a 12.7mm machine gun. A hit to any part of the body would be fatal. But can the new Abrams withstand a point-blank grenade launcher? Abrams SEP V4 is equipped with an Israeli Trophy Active Defense System. The Merkava Mk4, which is currently fighting in Gaza, is also equipped with this system. And judging by the numerous videos, the effectiveness of Trophy so far leaves much to be desired. Well, let's hope that Abrams X will be equipped with something more reliable. But in our opinion, the delivery of Abrams X to the conflict zone would be more important from the political point of view rather than the military. They would clearly show that the U.S. is determined to protect its main ally in the Middle East, and it would cool down the hotheads in Iran and Russia. And that's it for now. Let's hope that the war in Ukraine and Gaza will not be the trigger for World War III. What do you think about the newest U.S. tank? Write about it in your comments below, and please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and click on the bell so you don't miss new videos about modern weaponry. We hope you have a great day, and we'll see you again soon.